everyone, my name's Jan and I work here at Lambourn End on the gardens. Hopefully you've seen our previous video from the gardens and really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, if you haven't, please check that out. Also, please check out the videos from the farm, which gives you a really good look around, and also some of the stuff all about the lambing that's happening right now. Very exciting times. So I thought you might be missing some of the stuff that we get up to in the garden. And maybe you're sitting at home thinking, well, I can't do any of that at home. But you're wrong. You can. There are some great things that you can still be doing at home, even if you don't have any access to some outside space. All you need is a sunny windowsill. But I do warn you, you do actually need access to some soil. So you will need to source that from somewhere, a raised bed or someone else's garden. Perhaps they can give you a small bag full of soil. We can't do without that. But we can do without the outside, and we can grow some really cool stuff. So the first thing I'm going to show you is how to grow some peas indoors. Peas generally are really big plants. They grow about 60 to 90 centimetres high, and then they flower and produce peas, and that's what we pick. I'm not suggesting that we try and do that indoors, because we don't want to start creating a jungle, do we? But what we can do is still grow some peas, but pick them really early. And what you then get are things called pea shoots. And they're really tasty, they're lovely in salads, and they're very good for you. So that's what we're going to be showing you how to do. You don't need any pots, and I've got some pots here, some of these sort of brown pots. Can be useful, but we don't necessarily need any technical equipment like that. What I'm going to use today is a pot from the supermarket. Now this had grapes in, but a lot of soft fruit come in these, strawberries and blueberries, things like that. And luckily for us, they've got holes already in the bottom. You can use these sort of mushroom pots as well, but they don't have holes generally in the bottom. So if you are going to use these, you will need to have some holes put in the bottom. So please ask an adult to help you with that. Just some slits, just to allow the water to drain away. But I'm going to use this one. So say this just had some soft fruit in. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to fill it up with some soil. You're going to get your hands dirty as well. That's a good thing, right? If anybody at home says that you're making a mess, just tell them that you're gardening and it will be all right. So we're going to fill it up, and we're not going to fill it right to the top. If we fill it right to the top and then we water it, there's a very good chance that some of the soil will spill over and then you will get told off. So we're going to just fill it up to about a centimetre below the top line. I hope you can see that, about a centimetre below the top line. And then the next thing we're going to do, because there's a lot of soil in there, but there's also quite a lot of air in there as well. And whilst we want some oxygen in the soil, we don't want big pockets of oxygen. So the way that we get rid of them is just using the fingers on the backs of our hands and just very gently, not hard, very gently press down on the top of the soil. That's called consolidation. Nice big word. But basically it just means that you are flattening the top, putting a little bit of pressure on the soil and taking out some of that excess oxygen. So now we should have a container 9/10 full of soil. And now I'm going to show you the peas, and they just look like ordinary peas, but dried. Okay? Some falling out of my hand there. If you were to put these peas into water, they would suck that water up very much like a sponge, and then they would end up just looking like ordinary peas, sort of peas you recognise, frozen peas from the supermarket, but they're dried. So what we're going to do with these, we're going to lay them just on top of the soil, and we can put them quite closely. We don't have to put them in rows, we can just lay them on top of the soil. And I reckon you could probably get 10 to 15 in a container like this, but say we can plant them really close. Bearing in mind we can plant them close because we're not going to let them grow into full-grown plants. We're going to cut them when they're still really young, so they don't need a lot of growing space. There's an escapee, let's put that one in there. So now I've got my peas, hopefully you can see, on the top of my pot. How deep do we put the peas? Surprisingly, they need to be quite deep. Peas and beans like to be snuggled down in the soil quite a long way. So probably about 5 centimetres that they need to go down into the soil. I'm not suggesting you get a ruler out, but there is something that we can use that everybody's got, most people have got, and that's fingers with knuckles, okay? And if you look at your second knuckle, that's about 5 centimetres. That's about how deep the pea wants to go. So the very easy way of doing it is putting your finger on top of the pea and push it right down into the soil until you reach your second knuckle. And then you can just pull the draw the soil in over the top as you go. Okay, they're all done. I'm just going to put a little bit of soil on top because I've made some quite big holes where my finger's gone in. So I'm just going to put a little bit over the top, and again, just with the backs of my fingers, gently push down. There we go, all done. One more thing we have to do is give them a really nice drink. One of the advantages of using these clear plastic pots is that you can actually watch and you can see how much water to put in, because you can watch the water as it goes down the side. So give them a water, and the last thing we need to do is put a label on it. We need to put a label on it, we need to say what it is, and quite importantly, we need to put on it the date that you planted it. The reason we do that is they should be up in a few days, week to 10 days, depending on how warm they are, if you've got a nice sunny windowsill. And if they're not, it means that they're probably not going to grow. So that's why we put the date on it. Otherwise you'll be thinking, when did I plant that? Was it last week? Was it the week before? You won't remember. So always put the date on it and put the name on it. Now I've got a really nice plant label here. It's a proper plant label, but you can use anything. I've used the inside of sort of snack pots before. Once they're finished, you can cut those up, and again, you might want a grown-up just to help you take the top ring off, and then you can use the sides of one of those snack pots, and they're actually quite good. They're quite water resistant, and you can write on them with a pen or a pencil. So you don't have to have anything jazzy like this. Milk, the plastic milk bottles that you get as well, they're also very good, but you might want on one of those a permanent marker or a really thick pencil, just to make sure that that goes on properly, because that can be a little bit trickier to write on. But it doesn't have to be anything fancy. If you've got some paint, you could even just paint it on the outside of your pot, maybe put a few flowers on it and decorate it. So we're going to put some water on that, put the plant label in, and then it just needs to go on a sunny windowsill. When they start growing, you want to pick them when they're about 10 to 15 centimetres high. And all you do, you either snip them off with your finger and your thumb, or a small pair of scissors, and you just cut them off at the soil level. Once you've done that, the peas won't grow again, but there's nothing to stop you putting some more in the same soil and starting the whole process all over again. So the next thing I'm going to show you how to plant, or how to grow, is garlic. Garlic is part of the onion family, so things like onions, spring onions, garlic, leeks, all in the same family. What that means is that they're related, like you're related to cousins or aunts or granddads, but you're not all the same, you're all different. Same with the onion family. And I'm sure that a lot of you are familiar with garlic that looks like that, which is a garlic bulb that you get in the shops. And each bulb is divided up into several segments, and very often when you're making things like garlic bread or putting garlic in food, you'll take one or two of those cloves, one or two of those segments, and that's what you'll use in your cooking. But what we can do with these garlics from the shop is to actually grow them ourselves. And here I've divided up a bulb of garlic into 4 cloves, and each one of those, if we put it in the ground, will give us another one of those. So it's quite a good return, isn't it? You've got about 8 to 10 cloves on a bulb, and if you planted each one of those, you will get another whole bulb from each clove. So again, I'm going to use one of these containers from the supermarket. I like these just because the holes are already in the bottom, but say anything, you can use anything really. It needs to be reasonably deep. You've got to give these things a chance. There's no point in putting it in something really shallow because it will really struggle. But something deep like that, absolutely perfect. And I'm going to fill it about 3/4 full of soil. Okay, so I've got my container, probably a little bit more, probably about a little bit over 3/4 full. And again, same thing as I've done before. We want some oxygen in that soil, but we don't want big pockets of oxygen. So I'm going to use the backs of my fingers and very gently push on the top of the soil, just to make it nice and flat and push any of those big air pockets out. So a container this size, probably we could get away with 2 cloves of garlic in something like this. If you have a bigger one, then 4. If you do have access to these sort of single pots, then 1 per pot. Okay. So the cloves have a definite shape. There's the base, which is quite flat, and then the top goes up to a point. Okay. So they need to go up the right way. So we need to make sure that the base, the flatter bit, is pointing downwards, and this pointy bit is going to go up to the top, because this is where the shoots are going to come from. And what we do with garlic, like we do with onions, we don't bury it completely. We put it in the soil and then we push it in very gently, but we leave just the top showing. And once you've done that, apart from watering it, labelling it like we've done before, and remembering to put the date on it, put it on a nice sunny windowsill and let it do its thing. As it grows, we can take the leaves and use the leaves. We can cook with them. We can use them in things like pesto, so we can chop them up really finely or put them in a food blender with other sorts of herbs and spices and make things like pestos for to go on our pasta. We can chop them up really finely and put them in things like salads. But the important thing, if you're going to do that, is not to take all the leaves. If you take all the leaves, then the plant won't be able to photosynthesize. And I'm sure you've learnt that in school. Photosynthesis is where the green plant takes the sun's energy and turns it into sugars, food for itself. And that's what makes it grow. So if you take all of its leaves away, it won't be able to do that, and it could well die. But you certainly can take some of the leaves as they grow. If it starts to flower, then you can even eat the flowers as well, and the flowers are really, really strong in flavour, so you want to go quite easy on those. Keep them on a nice warm windowsill, and they'll be ready when the leaves start to turn yellow. So once the leaves start to turn yellow, you know that to stop watering it. Okay, at that point, don't give it much more water, because it's really done all its growing at that point. You can then very carefully lift them out of your soil, and you should have, I've got 2 bulbs in here, and you should have 2, so we've got 2 cloves in here, and we should have 2 new bulbs of garlic in here. The next thing really, if you're not going to use them straight away, is that you need to give them time to dry. If you think about onions and garlic, the outside of the skin is very papery and very dry. So we want to make sure that the same thing happens with this garlic. So put it somewhere airy and dry, maybe the airing cupboard if you're not going to get told off, but just somewhere where it's not going to get soggy. And then once the outside goes very papery, like this, like the onions do and the garlic do, then they'll store quite nicely in your cupboard for quite a few weeks. So give it a go. So the final thing I want to show you how to grow at home is a bit bigger. You need a little bit more space, but hopefully you'll be able to do it, and that is growing your own potatoes. So you might well have at home, in your cupboard at home, a potato that looks a bit like this, where you haven't used it, you haven't eaten it, it's started to go all wrinkly and baggy, it's soft, and the eyes of the potato are starting to sprout. So can't really eat that, wouldn't taste very nice, would it? I don't really want to eat a saggy, baggy, soft potato. But we can plant it, and 1 potato will give you a whole bag full of potatoes. Here at Lambourn End, we normally gauge it, but if we put 1 potato in the ground, if we then pull out 1 kilo of potatoes from 1 potato, then we consider that we're doing really, really well. But how I'm going to suggest you grow them now is in bags. And generally speaking, if we grow potatoes in bags, it's not quite the same as growing them outside in the garden. So you probably won't get as many as a kilo, but do let us know of your successes. So I'll show you what we're going to use. What I'm going to use here is one of these bags, and it's a big white plastic bag. White's not a great colour, and I'll tell you why in a minute. I would have to, after I've planted this up, put this into a black bin liner. But we've got lots of these because these are animal feed sacks. So rather than buy something else, I would use what we've got. However, you might have some of these lying about if you've got access to a garden, or if you've got access to a balcony, and somebody in your family might have bought some compost home in one of these sorts of bags. You can use one of these. You can use a really tough carrier bag, but it has to be a really tough carrier bag. You can even use black bin liners. Now, depending on how strong your bin liner is, if it's quite flimsy, then you might want to consider putting in like 2 or 3 and sort of layering them up. So you put one inside the other to make them a little bit stronger, because we're going to have quite a lot of soil in these, and we are going to need to move them around when we're watering them. So the last thing you want is for all your soil to come out all over the kitchen floor. I don't think you'll be very popular if that happens. So use what you can lay your hands on. I've got this white bag, and you can see what I've done is I've rolled the top all the way down so it looks like a lot shorter. And in the bottom of this bag, I've already put about 10 centimetres of soil. And then, very simply, you take your baggy, saggy potato and you just lay it on your soil. And if you've got any of these, the eyes of the potato, if you've got any of those where they're sprouting already, try and make sure that those sprouts point upwards, okay? Any eyes that you've got at the bottom will, that's where the roots will actually start to form. So we want to try not to confuse the potato. If it's already got some of these growing, plant them so they're facing upwards. I reckon in a bag like this, only 1, maybe 2 potatoes. If you've got a potato like this that's got more than 1 sprout in it, you can cut that potato in half, and then that gives you 2 seed potatoes. But I wouldn't put any more than 2 in a bag this size. So I'm going to put this one, and I'm just going to plant it so that the sprouts are upwards. And I'm now going to use this one, and I'm going to do the same thing. And now what I'm going to do is very carefully cover the potatoes. So I'm going to aim to put another 15 to 20 centimetres on top of the potatoes. So if you think about how long a ruler is by the time you're finished, it should be about a ruler's depth of soil in your bag. Once you've done that, you need to give them a good water. I should have said earlier, actually, make sure you've got some slits in the bottom of your bag, and you might want an adult to help you put some slits in the bottom. It's actually easier to put them in once you've got some soil in the bag. Just a knife or a pair of scissors, and just put a few holes in, and then you need to give them a really nice water. You need to then let them drip somewhere, so maybe in a bath, in a sink, and then you need to just put them somewhere and let them do their thing. I said earlier that this white bag is not ideal, and that's because we need to try and stop the sun from getting, the sunlight getting to the potatoes. I don't know if you've ever come across potatoes at home where they've perhaps been in your cupboard for a long time and they've started to turn green, and that's what happens when the sunlight gets to potatoes. They start to go green, and once that happens we can't eat them. It's actually poisonous, and it will make us really poorly if we tried to eat green potatoes. So we need to try and stop the sunlight getting to our potatoes. So what I would need to do now with this white bag is actually put it inside a black bag to stop that sunlight coming through this white polythene. And then we water, and then we wait. Make sure that the soil remains damp, but you shouldn't need to do a lot of watering because there's a lot of soil in there, and it will inside a piece of plastic like this, it will stay quite damp quite well. And what you're looking for are the green leaves as they start to appear. And this isn't the end of the story. As soon as your leaves start to appear, guess what you have to do? You have to cover them up with more soil. And this is why I've rolled the bag down, because what's going to happen, the plant is going to grow up through the soil, and you're going to dump another load of soil and completely cover the green leaves. That will encourage the potato to push through that next layer of soil, and you're going to throw another layer of soil on top of that. And then as you're doing that, you can gradually unroll your bag so it gets taller and taller and taller. The idea that you're trying to put as much depth of soil between where your potatoes are growing in the bottom and the leaves that are at the top. The more soil you have there, the less chance you've got of the sunlight being able to get through and turning your potatoes green. How do you know when your potatoes are ready? Your potatoes will flower. Depending on which sort of potato you've got will mean that the flowers will be a different colour. So some are yellow, some are pink, some are white, and some are combinations of all three. So keep a lookout for the flowers. Generally speaking, your potatoes will be ready once the flowers have died away. And what will happen is the flowers will die away, the leaves will start to turn yellow, and they will start to die as well. And that is a really good time then to tip that bag out and see how many potatoes you've got. So there are things there that I've given you that you can have a go at home. There are some other things that you can do as well. Check out the links below, which will give you some ideas of what we can do with our waste vegetables. You can take a lettuce leaf, put it in some water, and it will actually start to root, and then you can plant that and you will get a whole new lettuce from one lettuce leaf. Spring onions, you can do the same thing with those. Put them in some water, keep taking the green, and as long as the white bulb remains, it will keep shooting up through the middle and you'll get lots more onions. So there's loads of ideas, hopefully to inspire you, and hopefully that will keep you going until you can come back here and do some proper gardening. See you soon. Bye bye.